Hello everyone, welcome to UFO Enigma. I'm Ron Ricky, your host. Now see, on the last show here, just before the summer break began, I was just getting into the Warminster, England story. Warminster is like the Gulf Breeze of England. So, well, I'm going to continue on more or less where I left off on the last show. But before we get to that, I got a nice little story here out of the Weekly World News of August 16th. Now, the first page here is headlined, "Jupiter radios Earth for help." You know, I mean, the Weekly World News is a tabloid, but we'll go along with, cover a little bit. It has something to do with UFOs. So, now, if you've been watching the last 50 shows or so, you know that all I have to see is something like this, and I'm going to pick it up and buy it anyway. Now, the story itself is Jupiter sends distress signal to Earth. And it's actually kind of a two-part story. One is interesting. I think the signal part is kind of interesting, and the other one's a little bit disturbing. I just really didn't care for it that much, but it's kind of scary. Now, the first story quotes a Dr. Lucas Mirisch. I hope I'm saying that right. He's a scientist supposedly with very close ties to NASA. Now, according to Dr. Mirisch, NASA has confirmed the fact that signals have and are being received from the planet Jupiter. Okay, now, according to the story, the signals started early in June. Now, this is a few weeks before the giant planet was pelted with the pieces of the Shoemaker-Levy 9 comet. Okay, the story goes on to say that since the signals came before the comet hit Jupiter, they figured it was some sort of a frantic SOS that was sent up by some life form in the vicinity of Jupiter. So the signals are supposedly being received one every 76 minutes and 35 seconds, according to the article in the paper here. Now, the message itself lasts for about 13 seconds. And then it goes on to say that NASA has been investigating every angle of this particular story with the signals coming in. And according to the story again, they said this is no hoax. So it's secondhand information. You're not really getting it directly from NASA, but through another person. But according to this article, it says here, there's nowhere else the signals could have came from but the vicinity of Jupiter. Okay, now, a special decoding agent claims the messages have a mathematical pattern, and he's quite sure that he and his staff, the people who are working on decoding this thing, that it is an SOS of some sort. Now, Dr. Mirisch claims that before the comet hit Jupiter, the signals themselves were originating from two positions out there in space, and that after the comet struck, the signals came from one source, leading them to believe that one of these places might have been hit by pieces of this comet. Now, I have to make a little side here, comment of my own. This story does neglect to inform the reader that the space probe Galileo is also in the general area. And oh, just before the Jupiter was hit, I did a show and sort of in preparation and everything. And Galileo, even though she was having some mechanical difficulties, was sending out lots and lots of information, radio beams and pictures. Now, I would imagine this is just my own way of saying, you know, are these messages actually from one of our own probes? And through secondhand information, they get a story out of it saying that radio signals are coming from Jupiter, because we do have something out there. But I would imagine, you know, that the NASA space officials, they could recognize a message from one of their own machines. So now that ended the first part of that particular story. Let's get to the second part. Okay, now this was a little bit, it's like a subsection of the main article, and it was subtitled, "Comet Fragment Will Strike Earth September 18th. Now, this was a disturbing little one, even if it was a lot of hooey, you know, but it's kind of interesting because Earth, people do know that Earth has been whacked every now and then by something from outer space, and but this is a little bit going way out. This story claims that a very, very big chunk of the Shoemaker-Levy is heading for Earth. Now, the article quotes an astronomer, Dr. Marvin Hontower. Now, he claims that the scientific community has known about this situation and was in sort of a big hurry to keep this secret for fear of starting a panic or something like that. And the chunk itself is supposed to be about a mile across and hurtling towards Earth at 140,000 miles an hour. Now, Hontower claims this fragment will strike somewhere in the Midwest, and he claims there was a few other little things in there, but I'm not going to really say it. He claimed the impact would have the force of 100,000 times the power of all the nuclear weapons now stored on Earth. That's one mean blast. Okay, now Hontower also claims of a kind of a nasty picture after this thing hits. There'll be a tremendous blast and shock wave, according to this guy, and a great big dust cloud that will block out the sun for months. A la, say, Mount St. Helens blowing up, you know, with all the soot and everything coming out and just making like an atomic winter. Now, getting back to Hontower, he claims that the experts have known about this for over a year. Now, since May of 1993, this was about 2 months after Shoemaker and Levy correctly predicted that the strikes would occur on Jupiter at the precise time a year ahead of time. So, in other words, they must have not only saw those fragments that were in line heading for, they had a little map, a little sort of like a space map. I don't know if I can even it'll show up on TV here, but the fragments coming in line hitting Jupiter on its way past the sun. A couple of those fragments sort of broke off from the main cluster and were heading supposedly towards us. Okay, now we're getting into like where the cavalry has to come to our rescue. Okay, the article said that military, they said the Army, I don't know how they would say the Army would be the ones to go up and knock this out, but I would imagine it'd be NASA and the Air Force. But the military is setting to launch a barrage of nuclear missiles, and I suppose if they let them go in a flak pattern like they were shooting at a bomber or something, the piece of the comet would go through it and bust up when it hits the blast. Now, experts sort of figured that they could get this down to manageable sizes, and if they did hit the Earth, they would be just like a common meteorite you see on a summer sky or whatever, or the blast would maybe just make them go veer away from the Earth. So this is one story in the tabloid. I sort of hope this is a whole bunch of hooey, but we'll see. Okay, now we can get back to Warminster. Get back to some of the lighter side of the UFO thing. Not so much disasters and stuff. I don't like that. But now, when I left off on the last show, I was into an article from the Daily Mail of London. It's quite a big paper there in London, and the date was April 15th of '94. Now, this was about a guy named Roger Hooton. Now, he claimed that he and a friend faked a UFO photo way back in 1964. Now, apparently, the fake job was so great that that the experts fell for it. It was used as a bona fide type example of a genuine UFO picture. It was used in stories done in newspapers, stories done in... It was even made a couple books, too, I think, in England. And as I said in closing on the last show, it's too bad things like this do happen, because now, you know, you got someone saying we got a fake. Okay, now, but if someone does report a real UFO, or he does take a genuine, you know, really good shot of a picture of a UFO, they'll maybe slopped off as crackpots. You know, I mean, they could be taking pictures and actually seeing things that are really there, but this fake story gives the whole thing a little tinge of carnivalism. So this is kind of a, I don't know, a takeoff of the boy crying wolf type of thing, I guess. But Warminster has been a hotbed of UFO activity for the past 30 years. And in digging through some of my books and stuff I have in back here, I did come up with some very interesting Warminster stories. And one of them was in this Saga magazine. This is an old book. This was Saga's UFO Report, a summer issue of 1974 now. Back in those days, UFO magazines were plentiful, and your big outfits like Saga and Argosy would have 2 or 3 main issues where they had all the main stories. They had a summer, winter, fall, and a spring type of issue. This happened to be the summer one. Now, the title in the Saga one was Town Haunted, The Town Haunted by Flying Saucers. Now, don't forget, this is 10 years after Warminster really started getting into the news, into the flying saucer news. And before we get into the actual story, I think I spent a few minutes on the last show so more or less positioning Warminster, saying that it was very, very near an English national monument of a sort, and that's Stonehenge. Now, Stonehenge has been the subject of numerous movies, and people using it as a religious temple and a sacrificial temple, and a meeting spot where UFOs come into because they can see it so readily from the air. But its situation close to Stonehenge does, you know, greatly magnify the story. Where they have all those people anyway coming in to see this thing, you know, it's just a hop, skip, and a jump to Warminster area. Now, the article started off by saying that this is the Saga article now, that, you know, almost any night of the week. Now, this is when it was in its hot spell. Now, you can go out any night of the week and see an actual UFO. And if you brought your camera and stuff, they were right there. You could take a picture. And it was just one of those places that they just happened to congregate around. Now, the story was related by a Arthur Shuttlewood to Timothy Green Beckley. Now, Beckley's done numerous stuff since 1974. He's been in the UFO business for a long time. Now, upon investigation, there are some oddities which could be found in Warminster. Now, this was before, this happened right around Christmas of '64, and this is how it all began. And I'll just read a little list here, and then I can enumerate on them as we go along. Okay, the first sign there was disturbing sounds culminating to an ear-splitting roar. Now, I've done lots and lots of shows about sounds right here in this country. West Virginia, I think there's one in Colorado with a humming sound, New York State, so keep that in mind. The deaths of small birds and animals which defied explanation. I guess they took these things and autopsied them, and they couldn't find out really why they died, but they were dead. The materialization of solid UFOs in front of dazed eyewitnesses. Strange disappearances of everyday objects that belong to UFO witnesses. Now that sort of gets into that sinister black area, the gray area where the men in black and stuff are supposed to strike. If you know too much about UFOs, they come and give you a visit, or they pull these little pranks on you. And let me say, many accounts of actual meetings with the aliens in these ships. Okay, now we can dive a little bit deeper into this. Now, does it sound familiar? I mean, you've been watching the show right along. And don't forget how many years ago this was written. And after these strange events started happening here, if you wanted to compare, say, the video that I've done on, say, Gulf Breeze, which I spent a couple of weeks on, with this one here, you'll find some striking similarities with Warminster to that of the sightings, the very recent sightings, mind you, in Gulf Breeze. And I have been, just to go aside here for a second, over the summer I've been getting news clippings. I can hardly keep up with them, and Gulf Breeze is getting hot again. And that's not hot summer Florida sun, it's getting UFO hot. And we'll have to start covering that some more. Now, like I said before, now this Warminster thing started on Christmas morning at about 6 o'clock in the morning, 1964. Now, people were thrown, to go to the number one thing, the ear-splitting roar in sounds and stuff. People were actually thrown to the ground by this shock wave of this thing. And after the immediate shock wave, the air was sort of filled with a weird electrical crackling sound. And the crackling sound turned then into a high-pitched humming sound. Now, these were just sounds. No one saw anything at first. Now, people had heard clattering upon their rooftops, and one person who was in the book here, he was rudely awakened from a very sound sleep, and quite put out about the whole thing. But he heard the sound, he didn't say anything. In all, about 20 reports of unseen but heard sounds and apparitions were related to the authorities that day. And we get to part two. The bodies of the small animals such as mice, birds, I would imagine bats, and were found on the ground, scattered about, and they had unidentifiable scorch marks on them that they didn't know what burnt them. It was probably, if it was a UFO, it was probably some sort of electrical burn, but they didn't elaborate on that. Now, pets, staying with the animal type thing, pets in the town reacted strangely. Now, dogs would hide. If they had a doghouse, they wouldn't come out of their doghouse. If they were house pets, they ran under the bed and whimpered and cried. And they said cats in the area were all agitated. You know how they hiss and they raise their back and the hair stands up for no reason whatsoever. But there was a reason, though. And some pets did die, according to the story, from sheer fright. And after this sound barrage came third part, the materializations. Now, stunned eyewitnesses reported, and you'll find this as near back as 1988 in Gulf Breeze was the heavily reported sightings around here back then. And they would be standing there, the eyewitnesses, and these craft would just appear out of nowhere, materialize. And when they did materialize, they were real looking. They weren't hazy. They weren't foggy. Some witnesses said they looked like a flying train. Other people said they looked like flying railway coaches. They were long craft with rows of lighted windows and more or less the cigar shapes that we've been talking about over the years with the rows of lights and generally no appendages at all, no visible signs of propulsion or steering, just a long cigar-shaped type of thing with viewports in it. Now, all this was, all this and more now continued to keep Warminster on the alert now for the last 30 years or so. So I got to repeat now that this guy Hooton, just because of him admitting to a picture. Now I'm going to get to a second part here on this here now. It does throw a light of ridicule on it. But I'm sure that most of the sightings in that particular part of England were real, and they were made by very responsible people. Now, we're going to hear more about this. As I was writing this script down, I had finished off this particular little section by saying I'm sure we're going to hear more about the Warminster sightings. Then a bombshell comes. So I was finishing up here, and one of my newspaper clipping service things come in, and while wrapping it up, it come in, and lo and behold, I don't even have to wait till another show. Here's another news clipping on the Roger Hooton controversy. Okay, now if you remember, Roger Hooton, he admitted making a UFO out of a bottle cap and some aluminum foil or something, and him and a friend named Gordon Faulkner, they went outside to a field somewhere just outside of Warminster and kept dropping this thing and taking pictures of it. Now, this article here comes out of the Western Daily Press. This is out of Bristol, England, and the date line was April 18th of '94. The headline reads, "My UFO picture is the genuine article." And the story went on to, the beginning of the story sort of rehashed how Roger Hooton had come clean and admitted that him and another guy faked the photo. Now, then it gets very interesting down towards the end of the article. Faulkner in the article claims that he didn't even know anybody by the name of Roger Hooton. He says Faulkner repeated the story about how he and Hooton faked the making of this little UFO and the photographs and the whole thing outside, just out on the outskirts of Warminster. Now, Faulkner claims that he was in his garden in the rear of his house in Warminster itself when he saw the UFO he took a picture of. He was there puttering around, hoeing the tomatoes or something or whatever, and he grabbed his camera and snapped a very good picture of what has now become to be known as the Warminster Thing. And the article more or less just reiterated Faulkner's denial of the whole thing, saying that his is a legitimate story, and here we have it now. We have two completely different stories about one photo, and who's telling the truth here? You know, I'm sure there's going to be more on this, and we'll just have to wait and see. Now, in the last few minutes here that I have, I got to make a little comment here on the made-for-cable movie that aired last month, which I am already a proud owner of a copy, and I sort of got to it when they were wrapping the movie up, and I made mention to it, you know, getting everybody ready for when it was going to be shown. And there was a little article that discusses the motion picture Roswell, and I more or less enjoyed the film. I thought it stuck to the facts to a point, and but the filmmaker was more or less trying to, I don't know, he's trying to get sort of a dark, moody atmosphere in this picture, and it sort of reminded me of the style of Fox's X-Files. If anyone hasn't seen it, the X-Files is, to me, a very good series, which deals almost with most of the paranormal subjects, including UFOs. And the premise of the series is about a section of the FBI which handles these cases, and the two agents, Mulder and Scully, it's a man and woman team who deal with these cases with a vengeance. Now, I can set you up a little bit on this. Mulder is he's the guy. He's a true believer in anything paranormal, and if you watch it, he thinks he's been abducted and he's had contact, whereas Agent Scully is the skeptic in the team, and it does make a nice balance. But this little article here comes from the Journal out of Albuquerque, and it was datelined Roswell. It was datelined July 29th of '94, and it was headlined Roswell, UFO Fact or Fiction. Now, the article comments more or less on the film as I've been going along, and I can see that I'm going to run out of time, but we can continue this a little bit later. But it was, if you get a chance to catch it on repeats, I would say see it, because it does give you a good idea of the granddaddy of all sightings, the Roswell incident. And with that, I'm going to wrap this up, and I'm going to ask you, keep looking for them UFOs. Bye-bye.